Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us on our second episode of our new podcast. In case you missed last week's episode, we had a conversation, a discussion around working from home during COVID-19. We had a great talk, great discussion. In case you missed that, you could go on our Facebook page or our YouTube page where you could catch up there. Today, we're going to talk about money. What should I be doing with my money during COVID-19? And I'm super excited about the topic today and also the two guests we have with us on this episode. So first we have, let me bring them up. There we go. First we have Julie Leduc. Julie is a mortgage agent broker. She's a certified financial coach. She got a degree in business accounting. I mean, there's so many hats, and she's also the owner of three companies. Julie, do you mind? First, Julie, thank you for joining us on the show today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Julie, tell us a little bit about those three companies that you're the owner of.
So obviously I'm a mortgage agent and I work for Mortgage Brokers Ottawa. So I've been doing that for a number of years, and I'm also a certified financial coach. So obviously when I think about being a mortgage broker, it's very self-explanatory. I provide mortgages for people, residential mortgages, for anyone who needs one. A certified financial coach would be someone that would guide and help and strategize in regards to cash flow, in regards to business cash flow, in regards to day-to-day finances, paying off debt and building wealth. So what I want to do is I want to give people a launching pad to launch into the future, because what's prevalent in today's society is really that people are living above their means and they're indebted way more than they should be. Like it says in regards to revenue statistics Canada, that we are indebted at $1.76 for every dollar earned. So at the end of the day, we're almost spending twice as much as we earn. So I need to find a way to be able to launch people into a better financial state. That's what I do. So my three companies are Beyond Mortgages, which is mortgages and coaching in the Ottawa region. I have a company called You Move Your Money, which is financial coaching, accounting, and anything financial related, business related. And that's a national corporation, so it covers across the country. And then I also have Beyond Your Capital, which is a real estate investment company.
Wow, so you're a very busy lady, and thank you so much for tuning in today, Julie. Next, we have Benjamin Abbago. He is Ben. Tell us a little bit about what you do, where you work, and what's your title.
Sure. Thanks, Pastor Eric. Thanks, Julie, for having me on the podcast. My name is Benjamin Abbago. I work as a business development consultant with Manulife Bank of Canada. In my role, I'm responsible for Ottawa, and since late last year, Eastern Ontario was also added to my portfolio. So basically, I work with about 2,000, close to 2,500 financial advisors and mortgage brokers across my territories. I help them with everything banking, bringing in deposits, lending into their practice, product reviews, updates. I do seminars, some form of product coaching as well. So pretty much sales and business practice related. In terms of training, I am also a chartered investment manager with the Canadian Securities Institute. I also happen to be a fellow from that institute as well. And since 2016, I earned my master's from the University of Ottawa.
Wow, we're so privileged to have both of you on the show today. I feel like you guys are really the people we need to be asking the questions on what to do with our money. A little disclaimer here for Benjamin is that he's offered to be on the show here today, but it's important to know that his views will be more his opinion instead of reflecting his employer, which is Manulife bank. So thank you again, both of you, for being on the episode today. Let's dive into our subject, and let's start with the question. In your opinion, do you think we're on the brink of an economic depression? I mean, you're hearing that on the news, you're reading about that, people are saying that. In your opinion, do you think we're on the brink of a depression, economic depression, and if so, why? Maybe we could start with you, Ben.
Sure. Thanks for asking that question, Pastor Eric. I'm glad you asked the question because, like you said, it's been quite a topic, especially for those of us who follow the news network. In my humble opinion, when it comes to depression, in this case, we're talking economic depression. We have a long way to go to actually classify what's happening or what might be in the brink to be a depression. Let's go back a little bit. The last depression that the world experienced was back in 1929. So we're talking some 91 years ago, and actually it did start by the stock market in New York crashing, and then that kind of had a ripple effect across the globe. But when you look at where the world has come from and or where we are today, for us to go back to a time when there will be long and sustained period of um, unemployment, lack of production from industries and services, for us to get to that point, in my opinion, I would say it's going to take a rather, a cataclysmic, event for the world to get there. Talk about recession, perhaps, we're probably, officially there, but a depression will probably be a milestone, away. And the reason I'm confident saying that we're not at that brink yet is because let's go back to again when it first occurred in 1929. At that time, the world had very few central banks. In fact, the Bank of Canada, as we know it, wasn't even in existence back then. I think in terms of major, central banks around the world, we probably have the U.S. Federal Reserve, which has been around since 1913, and then the Bank of England since 1994. Even the World Bank wasn't around then. The IMF, the International Monetary Fund, wasn't around then. So the point I'm making is, should we ever come close to something like that? You can see where central banks and international monetary organizations are all going to pull resources together to try and prevent that from happening. Today, we have central banks that have so much leverage in the way they can regulate interest rates and to some extent inflation. So I think the world is more equipped today to handle shocks in economics to the point where another depression may not be something that we might see again, like I said, except something unusual and quite unnatural should happen, across the globe. Lastly, if you look at where we're coming from since 2019, 1929, back then, pretty much every country was operating in a silo. We hardly had, regional blocks like we have today. Back then we didn't have the EU, we didn't have, the free trade agreement or, countries like Canada, US, and Mexico coming together. We didn't have the APAC, we didn't have brink, talking about Brazil, Russia, and China and all that. So now we have around us, regional blocks that are very, very ready and willing to just, do whatever they can to make things work. A very quick example was last week or so. The German government just rolled out, I believe, some $15 billion just to support Lufthansa. That is a major employer, and more governments are going to do the same. Here in Canada, we've seen our government, introduce bills to support, the oil industry with stimulus packages and all that. So at the end of the day, I really don't see us going into a depression. I think, again, like I said, most countries, central banks they are very well equipped right now to really, give whatever jolts they need to give to their economies and make sure that things stay at least relatively normal.
Thank you, Ben. Julie, what about you?
Well, thank you, Pastor Eric. The first thing I'd like to say is we want to remember that we as Canadians are in the 5% richest people in the world. And I agree with Ben when he says it's not depression, but a recession. So at the end of the day, yes, we're headed into recession. Because how do they gauge when we're going to be in recession is that the sharp increase in unemployment, the way that people are spending or not spending, that's how they determine when we hit a recession. In this particular case, following COVID, we're just beginning to exit the COVID restrictions, I think that what's going to happen is that we have to understand that people are now going to be fearful and they're going to be cautious as to what it is that they're doing and where they're spending. So I think in the end, why are we heading in there? Well, because people are going to be scared. How are we going to get out of it? Well, it's going to take some time, because I think in the end, people are just not, they've never, the generations that's living now, they've never actually seen anything like this. We've never been part of a war. We've never been part of anything that really impacted our community. And now here we are, things have been shut down and the government has lent out or given out all of this money that's going to put us as Canadians behind the eight ball. It's going to impact us further in the years to come because we have to pay this money back. Canada is not a money printing machine. At the end of the day, it's got to come from somewhere, and it's going to end up coming out of our own pockets.
Wow. So let's drive this home. We're going to talk about what we should be doing with our money, but what's some things you think we shouldn't do with our money?
I was a bit cut off there a bit. I had an incoming call.
Yeah.
So the question again?
Yeah. So we're going to be talking about what we should be doing with our money, some practical advice on that. But what are some of the things you would say to our audience on what not to do?
I would start by saying don't panic. Let's start from there. Don't panic. I think there's obviously a lot of fear out there, uncertainty out there, but the world has seen something similar like this before, perhaps not in the same scale and reach. Like I said earlier, governments have rolled out their powers to see how they can arrest this, as best they can. And to Julie's point, yes, it's just a short-term, solution. A lot of money is going into these whole programs, but at some point, we'll have to pay for it. Obviously, we're just racking up our credit cards for now as countries. But I would say, people shouldn't panic. There's always light at the end of the tunnel. And if you have a job, if you're fortunate to still have a job, it's actually a wake up call to every one of us to consider serious financial planning. Making sure that we're putting money aside, making sure that we're not overspending, making sure that at the end of the day, what we're spending on is are things that we need, not necessarily just things we want. So I think again, I'll say, don't panic, don't hold your money. Okay, if you have and you have some appetite to perhaps be active in the market, obviously working with professionals out there, perhaps a good time, for you if you have the investor mindset, because the majority of investment assets right now, for lack of a better term, they are all on sale. But again, do it with reason. Making sure that you understand the risk involved, but working with professionals as well.
That's good advice. Julie?
Well, the first thing I would say is, again, I agree with Ben. There's so much going on out here, and what do we do with our money? The first thing we have to understand is that people have been living above their means. Until COVID, people, I would say to the tune of 75%, 80% of the people were living above their means in the country. What should they do at this point? I agree, they should really only spend what they need. I think that they should move, and I don't know that it hasn't happened, but I believe that COVID has shifted people to recognize what the difference is between needs and wants. The reality is that whenever you look at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, there's nowhere does it say in there that you need a new TV, or nowhere does it say in there that you need a vehicle. We understand that in today's society that we have to put in precautions and systems that are going to get people to work. I understand that we have to have a car to get to work for most people because we live far away from our employer. However, that doesn't have to be the Mercedes, and it doesn't have to be the $60,000 truck. At the end of the day, I think really what we need to look at is how are we managing our day-to-day finances? What are we doing with that? Because how can we invest if we don't have any money, if we've used everything up? So at the end, whenever we're all heading towards retirement. We all want to know how we're going to live in retirement. Well, if you haven't taken care of how you're managing your money today, how could you even get there? You will get there, but then it's probably not going to be nearly as nice as you would like or would expect it to be. So what should you do with your money now? I think you should be very cautious. You should definitely look at what could you eliminate in regards to debt. How can you pay off debt? I have some clients that have paid off debt tremendously during the COVID season because they've had different opportunities and they're not spending nearly as much. They're not going to the restaurants. They're not driving as much, etc., as we all know. So for sure, this is an opportunity to be able to pay off debt. However, what are you doing with this opportunity, right? So at the end of the day, we should be learning to live within our means once again, which means that debt should become a thing of the past. And we should be able to say we're living with what we have. We have $100, that's what we have. We don't have 500 because we can put the rest on Visa. So for sure, living within our means is what we think, what we should do. Does it mean that we should not invest? Well, if you've always been managing your money well, in my opinion, you should invest. Where? Well, we'll talk about that maybe a little bit later. But certainly there's the opportunity of investing it's real, it's there. I think COVID is bringing different possibilities in the future.
For sure.
Yeah, I think that's good. And you bring a good point. There's some people that may be listening to us right now and they've been managing their money well. They've had an emergency fund. They had some, savings and, maybe for them, they're not living paycheck to paycheck, and for a person like that, would you say there's some buying opportunities? I know I was biking with some of the neighbors and they were saying, like those $60,000 trucks, some of them are very cheap right now and they're considering. So, people are talking about remortgaging. Is there some buying opportunities for those who are not living paycheck to paycheck, who would not suffer and would actually have an investing opportunity? Is there anything like that right now that you would see that we could take advantage of?
Maybe I think that there is, but we have to make sure that we identify what is an investment, because an investment is not a depreciating asset, and a vehicle is never an investment because it's always a depreciating asset. So what you want to do is you want to get your money into an appreciating asset. So real estate is a great place to start. yes, refinancing your house is an option to be able to maybe roll your visa in there, or maybe your car, or however. However, you want to make sure that you have a plan and a system, because if you don't, you're going to find yourself in the same boat in the next couple of years or 3 years, because we're not out of the woods yet. I don't think that economy is going to be really super wonderful between now and a few years. So I think somewhere in there, you have to start looking at what you're doing and how you're going to be able to sustain your own livelihood going forward, because there are still challenges with work. There are still challenges with income. We're going to see some major shifts, I think, in this season, in the coming season.
Yeah,
Ben, what do
and
you think?
yeah, and if you know, if I may add to what Julie just said, at the end of the day, yes, there are some investment opportunities out there, but see, every individual is unique. Every situation is unique. Um, even if you see opportunities out there with great investment assets, you want to be very careful about your tolerance to risk. What kind of investment vehicles, can you hold at this time? But also think about your time horizon as well. If you have very short time horizon to maybe retirement, or you have a very short time horizon to when you might need proceeds of that investment, you may want to think twice before you go into, certain investments that may be long term before you can actually reap, the gain. So at the end of the day, again, I always stress, you want to work with professionals and make sure that you have all your I's dotted and your T's crossed for sure.
That's good.
Agreed.
Yeah. Um, we weren't prepared for this, as you know, and there may be somebody right now listening to us. They didn't have, an emergency fund. They were living paycheck to paycheck before COVID, and now they may have lost the job. They may have been laid off. They may have to stay home because the kids are home. What would you say to them? Is it too late? Is there still hope? What would you say to someone who's not had the practice up until today to lay some money aside, and they've always been spending it all and always kind of broke because they're living paycheck to paycheck? What would you say to someone like that? Maybe Ben, we'll start with you.
Yeah, again, never. It's always better to start somewhere. Fortunately for some people, they might be in a situation where they pretty much caught unaware, whereby no emergency fund, no perhaps reasonable cash in the savings account. I think my advice to folks like that would be it's never late to start. Look at where you are right now. If you have income coming in, you want to start by perhaps creating a budget for yourself. I know this is a very common theme where people say you got to work within a budget. That can be challenging. We all would agree, but at least start by uh, knowing where your money goes to in terms of your expenses, and then be smart enough to say, okay, this is how I spend. How much of these items do I really need versus the ones that I want? Um, if I can use myself as an example, I can't remember the last time I walked into a store to buy myself clothes. For me, maybe because it's just a man thing, but it's been a while, and thank God for the seasons. Like I wear a particular kind of clothing for like 3 months or so in a year, and then I move on to the next. So that's one. Focus on a budget. Think about the things you need. Pay more attention to that, but also force yourself to save if you can. If you're lucky to have an employer that contributes to a kind of retirement, pool for you, and there is some matching, opportunities there, go with the maximum. If your employer, gives you the leeway to have 5% of your pay deducted from your salary, even though they're going to match it or not, If you can, go by the marks. I used to be in that position where I was like, oh, geez, if I allow 5% to be deducted, what else is going to come in? But then over the years, you discover that you find a way to adjust in terms of your expenses. So force yourself to save, find a way, to put money aside. It could be, per pay, it could be on a bi-weekly basis or a monthly basis. One thing about humans is that we're very good. I think it's just in the way that God has created us. We're very good at adapting. So when you take such initiatives like, maximizing whatever amount that can be deducted from your pay towards say retirement. Yes, you might have little come in and you might feel the pinch for maybe a month or so. But trust me, by the second month or so, you've learned to adjust. You probably cut down, entertainment expenses. You've cut down your frequent visits, to the mall. Somehow you find a way to adjust. So, that's basically my advice for folks who haven't taken up such initiatives.
That's good. Julie?
Well, I want to start off. It's interesting because I want to start off by quoting a friend of mine, what he says all the time. And it's my friend Dave Ramsey. He says, if you live today like no one else, you can live tomorrow like no one else. It's a play on words. Obviously, if you're wise today, you can do things that others won't be able to do tomorrow. But the one thing that, we have to be real. We have to go back to basics. I think the shift that's happened in society with COVID is really about that shift. It's really, people are going to struggle going back to that, because if people have gone from 2 incomes to 1, it's going to make a huge difference. Does it mean that there are some people that are going to struggle greatly for their mortgages or for their debt? There may be. I don't know. We don't have the crystal ball. We all don't know. But I can tell you that having an emergency fund is of great value. I like to call it a small emergency fund and a large emergency fund. It's good to have $1,500 set aside to be able to cover something breaks in your house, your fridge or whatever. And then it's good to have 3 to 6 months savings in some other form. And that's where dealing with Ben, maybe doing an RSP or maybe a TFSA would be of great value. However, if you don't have the basics in place, how could you launch to the next level? It's going to be very, very difficult and maybe even unattainable. So what we do in my business is that we help people launch in a place that they can actually be successful, because success is different from everybody, right? We want to bring them from survival mode to stability, to success, to significance. A big part of finances, number one, is pride. For one, people struggle with finances and they're ashamed that they're struggling. I want you to know today that it's probably a very high percentage of people that are struggling. So please don't be ashamed. Pick up the phone, call a financial coach, get some guidance of where you need to go, because you know what? There is opportunity for you to be more successful. There is opportunity for you to find a new way to manage your finances so that you could find that stability and even success and even significance going forward. So at the end of the day, I think going back to basics is important. And to be honest, I think it's crucial. I think what's happening in society as we speak is people are reevaluating. And so once they're at a place where they're reevaluating and they're going, okay, where do I go from here? Maybe they need to have some support. Maybe they need some guidance. And that's where the professionals come in. But it's a great idea to have an emergency fund. And I think that if you don't, then you always resort back to credit, and then you find yourself in a spiral going downward.
Good stuff. I like how you guys differentiated depression from recession. So if we're heading towards a potential recession, how can we prepare for it? How can I prepare for it? And, the rest of the average people out there that are not financial coach, how can we prepare for that?
before I talk about preparation for recession, for the benefit of our audience, um, I think we probably owe them, a bit of explanation as to, what is recession in itself. Um, you know, the economists tell us that when a country's economy doesn't grow for 2 quarters in a row, technically that's you know that country's economy is in a recession. And there is this term called GDP that we will often hear around. Basically stands for gross dom- domestic product. What that basically means, in average terms, is the total summation of everything that is produced within a country, products, services, and all that. And to also break it further down, you want to look at it from this angle. What forms GDP? Again, the measurement for whether we are in a recession or not. You want to look at things like consumer spending, government spending, business spending, and also what we call net exports. So, are we exporting more than we are importing? But let's look at the first three that I mentioned. Consumer spending. This is the reason why the government, if you often pay attention, you see how government tries their best to put money in our hands when things are like, bad, economically, and they were like, they want us to go spend. They're giving us these stimulus packages and things like that, because they're thinking, oh, geez, money in the hand. Usually, people will like to spend. All that is geared towards getting that consumer spending up and hopefully getting the GDP up. And obviously, we've seen our government pouring money, like throwing money into the economy like never before. Yes, they're trying to stop the bleeding, but also their goal is that, oh, geez, we want to kind of get the economy going, manufacturing and all that going. And businesses as well, the government is trying to make sure that these folks are able to produce, other raw materials and produce. So everything is, pointing towards, getting the GDP up. But at the end of the day, all these measures can only go so far. If you're giving money to folks to go to the stores to go and spend, but some of us, for good reason, obviously, are afraid to go into the stores to actually shop, that money is not going to help the GDP because we're keeping it, until we're confident enough to actually step out to go and spend. So you can see the frustration on, mostly on the government side. A couple of days ago, there was news in the States that even the present administration in the States, they're considering, even as we speak now, to pay bonuses for people who agree to go back to work. So you can see all the efforts they're making to make sure that the economy doesn't actually fall into deep recession. So at the end of the day, I think with all the measures taken, mostly on the government side, businesses are a bit of handicap. They kind of rely on the government for the most part. I think at the end of the day, I think most economies, if not all world economies, are going to actually end up in a recession. And this is basically a period where we see a slowdown in the economy, less manufacturing, less, exports. We're going to see, a little bit of high unemployment, more than the usual. So the question now is, how do I prepare? I think for sure it's inevitable. We are some folks say technically we're there. Some folks would say, well, we're very, very, very close. I think we're already there. We just don't want to own up yet that we're there. So at the end of the day, how can we prepare ourselves? I think it goes back to everything myself and Julie have been talking about. You want to take advantage of the present situation in a way that hopefully will keep you afloat in the near future. Julie talked about perhaps a good time now for us to consolidate debt. If you're out there and you have all these high interest accounts like credit card balances and car loans and the rest, but you have an opportunity to consolidate such debt. In other words, use a lower interest rate, vehicle to pay off those accounts. Great opportunity. But again, I think when it comes to things like potential layoffs and job losses, I think it's a good time for folks who may see themselves as potential victims. We all are. In fact, I just got news this morning that a colleague of mine is being let go because of some restructuring. So at the end of the day, you want to make sure that your skills are up to date. You want to try your best to upgrade your skills. For whatever opportunity might come up. But interestingly, you also want to look deep within and maybe tap into your inner passions that over the years you've never really paid attention to. I mean, like last year, who would have known that making math could actually turn some people into millionaires? In terms of big companies. Myself and my wife for the last two weeks, we've been checking out on Roots website, roots.com, the clothing company, to see when masks could be available. It comes around, and in 20 minutes it's gone. It's sold out. You understand? And thankfully, we have some other providers. I don't want to mention names, so it doesn't act like we're advertising on their behalf. But these companies have kind of retooled, and they're looking for ways to tap into the reality. So the same thing with us individuals. We want to look deep into our passions. This perhaps might be a good time to consider so many giftings that we have that may in fact turn you into an entrepreneur. Something you never know you could do. So again, preparation, upgrade yourself. Be very careful with your expenses, and like I said, look deep into your passions.
Julie? Thank you, Ben.
Thank you. So the first thing that I'm thinking, how can we prepare for it and what can we do? For sure, it's a good time to grow as an individual, to grow personally, spiritually, and financially. It's a good time to start considering, if you haven't thought about it, rolling your debt into your mortgage. Why? Because you want to reduce the amount of outlay that's going out every month. So if you refinance and you put your credit cards or your car payments into your property, if you can do that, that's probably going to reduce your debt outlay, sometimes $1,000, $2,000 and more dollars per month. That will make a huge difference. For sure, living in a new way, but maybe sticking to basics. That's important. I think that at the end of the day, the message that Ben is giving is very solid and very good. I'd like to just say thank you, Ben, for doing that. I think that we need to understand where we are and where we're going. So where we are today, I agree with Ben. I think we are in a recession currently, and I don't think we're going to get out anytime soon. I think that it's going to take some time. I believe that people are going to find a new normal, because the old normal, I don't know that will come back. I believe that it's going to have to be a new normal, because financially has been affected greatly. It's been affected in many, many ways. There's stuff we still can't access to purchase like that we want. We go to the store, we still can't get stuff that we normally got every day without even thinking. What happens with the rules that are, they're being released, or the limitations of who's coming into the country, maybe the products that are coming into the country? I don't think we're out of the woods yet. A good thing that I would suggest that you do now, because the weather is nice and it's summer, why not plant a garden? Find other solutions. It's not just about money. Grow in different areas. Allow God to bless you freely by a garden. Why not? Something that I recommend to my clients, that I'm doing myself for the first time in my whole life, we've planted this massive garden. And why should we do that? Well, why not? It's free food. And that's where a big part of our money is going, is in food. Imagine how rich we would be if we didn't have to eat. But certainly that's an option. And like Ben said, finding solutions, like people that are making masks, they're making tons of money doing that. That's really great. Why not come up with a new solution? What's your gifts? What are you good at? Start a little side business. there's nothing wrong with having a little side hustle and making some money. I'm sure that most people that are work for themselves, that's how they started. They started with a side hustle, and then first thing you know, whoops, it's bringing in enough money. I think I can leave my full-time job. What if that's you? There's different possibilities. And I've also heard people that are doing deliveries right now. That's another area that has just exploded since COVID, is deliveries. I know some people that have been let go from their work and they began to deliver for companies, whether it be food or otherwise, and they're making a considerable amount of money. Now, granted, this is a different kind of job, but for some people it's working really well. So I think that how can we prepare for the months and the years ahead? I think we need to remember that spending the money we don't have is never a good idea. Never. It doesn't matter how you cut it or slice it. Spending money you don't have, you should not be doing that. If you find yourself today in a position that you have debt and that you don't know that you'll be able to pay it off, you can call my office. We can help you through that. Maybe Ben can help you through that. We can find solutions for you. That's what we do. We build strategies, because at the end of the day, there's always an answer. Might not be the answer you're looking for, but there's always an answer available for you.
That's good. I was reading something on CBC that was talking about, and they based it on prior economic crisis. And they said when you're allowed to spend now, when everything's kind of open, they saw a lot of people spending things that, like you guys said, they don't need. They just spend because now they're allowed to spend. And would you say that's more of an emotional kind of, I don't know the exact term, but it's kind of an emotional spending? They're just buying stuff because now they're allowed to. And,
I think people are addicted to stuff. I think in the end, there was somebody on the news just the other day. They said, I'm waiting in line to go to Winners. Well, first off, Winners offers no food, no basics. Winners, there's no basics there. It's all stuff, clothing, stuff. And I'm just thinking of it. I'm trying to think of another word, but at the end of the day, there's nothing wrong with Winners, and I'm glad that it's open and all of that. But the lady that was speaking on the news said, I'm just going in there to buy whatever. Well, if you don't need anything and you're going in somewhere to buy whatever, that means you're overspending. And you shouldn't, it's not something you need. So at the end of the day, it's about looking at that and curbing all of that. I think, it's quite interesting to see where people are spending or how they're spending. But definitely, if they're, if they have that itch to go out there, go and buy stuff you need. Because for sure, I think what we have is the itch is to get out. We want to get out and get back to what we considered normal. But that doesn't mean that we should go out there and rack up our credit cards. That really doesn't mean that. However, not everybody is going to be reasonable, I'm sure. The idea that I always like to suggest is if you're working from cash. Now, I understand the whole situation right now with cash, but the stores are starting to accept cash once again. But if you use cash, it actually registers pain in your brain. So the more you reduce the amount of cash you're holding in your hand, the more your brain registers, oh no, there's an alarm going off. Whereas if you're using your card, your credit card, your Interact card, and God forbid the tap system, you're not registering hardly any pain in your brain. So at the end of the day, how are you going to get there? I think if you want to go shopping, decide how much cash you want to bring, and bring just that $100 with you. Don't bring anything else, because then you'll be limited to what you need to get, whatever that is, right? Whatever stuff you don't know what you need, but whatever stuff you see that entices you. There's nothing wrong with it if you can afford it, for sure. But at the end of the day, we hope that everybody that's doing the crazy shopping, going back into it, will be reasonable and cautious. And I encourage you to do that.
That's good. We're running out of time, and we're going to wrap up in just a few minutes. But, given that our audience, we're speaking about money, and given that our audience, many of them are either members of a church, part of a church, or connected to the church in some way. Some people are maybe someone is thinking that, now that I don't go to church, should I continue to support the church? Should I continue to give tithe, give offering to the church? What would you guys say about that?
For me, I would say, why not? um, if uh, if if anyone out there understands the principle of prosperity, and I know the word prosperity oftentimes will connote money and the rest, but it's actually all encompassing. Prosperity is, yes, you have some money, but prosperity is also you have peace of mind, you have good health, your kids are well, there are no bad news around you, things like that. That's all prosperity, and I think there are many biblical principles that points to how being a partaker in God's work, contributing to the growth and sustenance of God's work, which in this case would be the church, how that can translate to prosperity. The church serves a very critical and, in fact, essential service. There are so many things that the governments are trying to help people with, to put food on the table and all that. But at the end of the day, we all have a spiritual need, whether we believe it or not, or we like it or not, we all do. So at the end of the day, the church is still there to help every one of us. And one way of making sure that people get the needed spiritual help, it's for everyone to still be a partaker in the work of God and in the work of the church. I look at it this way, somewhere in the Bible, I believe in John 5:17, Christ was talking about how the Father is always working, that God is always working, and that He too will continue to work. But then think about it this way: for God to work, He needs a tool. And if we make ourselves a tool in God's hands, guess what? He will never drop us because He needs that tool, and He will always take care of us when we make ourselves, a tool in His hands. So for me, it's a principle that has really, I think, blessed me in life, whether it be supporting the church, in the way that I can, or even in benevolent giving, giving to the poor, not necessarily you going out there looking for them, but when you find the opportunity or it comes your way, responding. The Bible encourages us that, he that gives to the poor is actually lending to God. The Bible didn't say you lend to the poor or you give to the poor, you're giving to God. No, you're lending to God, which means God now has an obligation to pay you back. So spiritual activities remain very, very important, especially the financial aspect of it.
I love this.
I agree. I think in the end of the day, we're required as Christians, as Bible believing Christians, that we are to give to the Lord to the tune of 10%. Regardless of how your money is coming in, that's your income. And at the end of the day, our objective, our goal should always be to meet what has been required of us. And so I think we can find ways around that. If you're not giving at all, and you're just starting to give, you don't have to start at 10%, but start somewhere and work your way to 10%. At the end of the day, we have to understand that if you have a church that you're calling home, that's the church that you're calling your home church, that's where you should be giving. And the other areas that the people love to give, in missions and different other opportunities, there's a lot of them out there. And we have to understand that we're required to help the poor, but we do that through the church. And the first and primary place that we're supposed to give our money, our income, our tithe, our earnings is to the church. After that, once you've reached 10%, there's nothing wrong with giving elsewhere, but certainly we should look at where we are sending our money first.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people who do and practice this, and they don't do it for the benefits that come from it. They really do it from a grateful heart and a generous heart and obedience. but many have shared testimonies of how they're seeing benefits from it. They're seeing, they gave something that they felt they needed to give, and it came back, bigger than what they gave, and as a church, I could say, we've seen that a lot of people's lives has been put on pause, whether it's, certain areas of their lives have been put on pause, but a lot of them, their generosity was not put on pause. And so they continue to show, their neighbors generosity. They help those in needs, and they've obviously supported the church during this time. And so we as a church are very grateful for them. Two last questions before we wrap this call. Do you guys have any good tips? Any secret sauce that you guys learn over the years? And I know those secret sauce, sometimes they cost you more because you went through trial and error. You tried things that didn't work, that costed you a lot. Maybe you were, I think you share that in your testimony, Julie, that you were once in debt. And today you're able to help a lot of people get out of debt because of your personal experience. Any good tips that you guys learned that you would give in a short 2 minutes?
Certainly. I mean, it's funny you say secret sauce, because that's the term I use all the time. So the secret sauce is really living within your means. It's really looking at where you want to be, setting small goals and getting there, and having accountability. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have accountability, you're not going to do it. Because if you could have done it already, you would have, but you haven't. So you need accountability to get there. I'd say that's the secret sauce.
That's good.
Yeah, I completely agree. For me, I would say spending within my means. I say no. There used to be a time when I would spend first, hoping to pay it off when I get paid. And guess what happens? I get paid, and then something else comes in, and then I go, oh yeah, you know what? I was supposed to put that money back. You know what? I'm just gonna put half of it, and then and I never get to put the other half back. Right? I keep racking up, balances and that. So, yes, stay within your means, but like I said earlier, take advantage of forced savings. Before the money hits the account, let it go somewhere else. Don't even see if you can. If you can do it in such a way that you don't see it coming to your bank account first, why not? Lastly, I think, as someone who is married, I think this principle has helped, myself and my wife as well in actually keeping ourselves accountable financially. So what we do is that, we have a joint account that we spend from. So, my money goes into my pay, my bank account now with my bank, which is just in my name. Hers goes into, her bank account. Interestingly, she also works at the bank. But we make sure once the money comes in, we have a designated amount that each person contributes into the joint account. That's where we spend from. But by doing so, we actually keep ourselves accountable. So when I'm spending from that account, I know she's going to see what I'm spending on. And I have to be careful what I'm actually spending on. Or she too has to be careful, because the time I come, I go, oh, geez, I see you went here and you spent that. Do we really need this? So I think that has also helped us, a lot in just keeping ourselves accountable.
I love that, Ben.
I'd like to just add to that, at the end of the day, accountability for sure is important, but I wanted to just say that, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm going to pass because I just lost my train of thought.
Yeah, that happens to me a lot. On that thought, Ben, my wife and I, we found that, accountability really works, and put everything in one pot in one account. And what we did to keep our sanity during this time, because it was kind of like, hey, you went to Tim Hortons, like, and what we decided to do is give ourselves an allowance. We would have maybe, $50 per 2 weeks or whatever, and just no questions asked. You go spend it on, you want this, you like that kind of stuff. Just go, buy your coffee or whatever. And so we give each other a little spending money so that we could do the things we like, and keep the big pot for the budget expenses and stuff like that. We found that really helped us to keep accountability, but at the same time keep our sanity. And not question every expense that would go in and it worked for us. I know there's multiple ways to do this. Last question, guys. You guys have been very helpful to myself and to our audience. In your opinion, when do you think the recovery of our economy will start, or what will it take for our economy to recover from COVID-19 in 2 minutes?
Very quickly, I would say, I doubt if anyone out there has any crystal ball to say this is when and how. Well, maybe to some extent how. I think, most of us will say, well, if we do this, this, and this, we may start heading towards recovery. But when, I think, nobody really knows. I will say honestly knows. At the end of the day, one thing for sure, how quickly the economies reopen, I think it will be largely dependent on what we do as individuals, the actions that we take. It saddens my heart to, see in the news how people just throw caution to the wind and still go out there, and act as if everything else was normal. No, it's not normal. And, until you've actually had, knowledge of people close to you that may have been affected, either because they are in the front lines working every day and seeing these cases, or family members that, even had, an incident of the virus. I think many of us may not, realize how dire the situation is. So I think at some point, we're going to see a reopening of the economy. My fear is that we may get a second wave. Again, largely due to people's indiscipline and maybe complacency. I fear for that moment, when again we might be forced to shut down again. So I really hope and pray that people take it seriously. What is happening today, it will come and pass with time, and then we all can start, go back to normal life. So, I think we just keep our fingers crossed, but more importantly, stay disciplined, follow the guidelines given by our public health officials, and hopefully we can all come back to any kind of, near normalcy like it used to be.
Agreed. I'd say also, we don't have the crystal ball anymore than anybody else. And so how do we get out of it, or when will it start or stop or whatever? Agreed, we don't know. It is anticipated, we're hearing that it could take a couple of years. However, how can we get through it? Well, I think maybe we want to reconsider, and I think we're hearing on the news that we need to shop Canadian. We need to stay within our own country, and we need to spend our monies here to encourage the economy to be boosted here in Canada. However, we don't know what it's going to take. I'm not an expert as to, an economic expert to know, to be able to say what's going to take, but I can tell you logically, it's going to take that people has to shift. We have to shift to a new normal, and we have to make sure that we're living within our means and we're saving, and things are just going to be different going forward, I believe.
Benjamin, Julie, thank you so much for your time. You guys are two very busy people, and your time today is precious. And I want to thank all our viewers as well for tuning in today. Tune in with us next week. Our guest speaker will be the Reverend Daniel Descaries. He's been a guest at our church before, and he will speak on marriage during COVID. He'll talk about parenting, marriage, family, and also the single life during COVID-19. And I don't think I need to tell you or show you some statistics that being locked down 24/7 with the same people, no matter how much you love them, can be sometimes challenging. And so he's going to give us some practical tips and resource on what we could do during this time to keep our marriage fresh, our parenting fresh. And if there's some singles listening to me, we'll make sure we get a few questions for you as well. and that will be Tuesday at 12. Thank you again, everybody, and may
Thank
God
you.
bless you, and let's spend wisely.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.